maintenance work.
Hey everybody, I'm Margie Ammon. I'm our Director of Facilities Design, and I manage our audit process, which informs our databases on deferred maintenance. And I work closely with Joe and his team throughout the audit process to make sure or to better our information, to update it on an annual basis, to improve the data and to update what it looks like. And just a brief overview, we audit a fifth of our schools every year for a total 5-year cycle, about just a little over 1 million square feet per year, which gets us to over 5 million in 5 years. And we look at the existing data, try to compare it with the new things our maintenance team finds. And then I also meet with each principal and their custodian with my team, and we update the information that way. So that's how we collect the information. And then it lives in a database called Cost Lab that is a life cycle predicting software that then tells us when things are needing to be replaced or past their life, which is then called deferred maintenance. So it's kind of a general overview of what that means. And then Sonia, do our members here have the 2.5.2 report in front of them?
I gave them a link to the monitoring report workbook so they can go to the tab for 2.52, 2.53 and see what the condition.
Okay, and Joe, did you want to say anything else about that beginning part, or would you like to introduce yourself? Sorry about that.
I'm Joe Steven. I'm the maintenance manager for the district, so I oversee all the trades personnel that does our routine maintenance, corrective maintenance, preventative maintenance, basically all the maintenance before it becomes deferred maintenance. Once it becomes deferred maintenance, larger items then get put on audits. We also, the maintenance department performs the field portion or half of the field portion of the audits, and Margie and her team do the other half of the audits, which I'm sure we can get more into as we go along. So thanks for having me.
So I'm not sure, the last time Joe and I presented, we answered questions more than presenting. I'm happy to just briefly go over the data that's in the report, or is it more like a question and answer type of platform, Priscilla?
You know, that really kind of depends on the people that we have on the call with us. And if they have questions, we always encourage them to ask. Sometimes we find that they're a little quiet, at which point it would be good for you and Joe, just thinking about your experience with this group, maybe to go back and highlight some of the questions you know have been asked before. So let's pause really quick and first and foremost, see, does anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask at this time?
I don't, thank you.
Margie, I'm just more or less interested in some of the data that you found, you know, bottom line, curious how the audits went.
Okay. So I do want to point out, and it's in the report, that our deferred maintenance went up quite a bit this past cycle, and that we were not in compliance. We're over the 10% allowed. And the report describes why. And it was really important for us to align some of our data with CDE and their best program. They have a different type of software that we're actually going to transition to in the next year or so. And we adjusted several categories that had, I'm going to use Windows as an example because that was a big one. So our current database gives Windows a 75-year cycle. The CDE database, and I don't know how many people are familiar with the BEST grant and the capital improvements division at CDE, but they they are in charge of reporting on the conditions of all of our schools in the entire state. So they're responsible for going to schools and doing their own audits. They've kind of put the larger districts on the sideline for right now, but when we apply for a BEST grant, they come and audit our facility and then provide us a report. But what we like about their information is it feels more realistic. So our database gave windows and doors 75 years of life. The CDE database gives it 50. So we changed all of our windows and doors in our entire database to have a 50-year life cycle instead of 75. And that impacted our deferred maintenance. We did that with some of our HVAC equipment, some of our plumbing equipment, just across the board from the bottom to the top of a building. We adjusted where we had a big difference. The 25 years is a big difference when you think of life cycle for a building. So that's why we climbed so drastically by like 32 million, I believe. And also something large might go deferred in a year compared to the previous year. And I don't have exact items, but just wanted to point out to you that even though we're wrapping up a bond, we planned that bond in 2016, and since then things continue to get added to the lists that weren't on the list at that time. So that's why it continues to grow. Instead of everybody's going, well, we just spent 350 million or whatever it is on a bond, why is it going up? It's because things continue to defer, like you always have to buy new tires for your car, right? Or pretty soon you won't be able to drive, or you have to change the oil, or if you don't, it breaks other parts in your car. And that's what our buildings are like, or your home. If you don't fix something in your home, if you had a plumbing leak and you didn't fix it, it's going to degrade a whole bunch of other things. So those are a few comparisons, and it kind of hopefully helps explain why our deferred maintenance has gone up. And we had that large 10-year gap between bonds that was huge. So we're playing a lot of catch up from that, and we'll continue to do so for a while. So I don't know if that answers your question, Kelly. I don't, and I think it was Kelly that asked the question. I don't have specific things that I found, but we're just in a cycle of more items becoming deferred. And that's why, and we made those adjustments.
Do you know roughly how many categories you did adjust? Did any of them go in the other direction by chance? Just out of curiosity.
You know, I don't think we did adjust anything in the backwards direction.
Okay.
Yeah. And I can't remember how many. I'm going to guess 15 or 20. I have the list in front of me, but I don't have the exact count.
The 75 to 50 years that is a very large jump, like you said, and of course probably one of the grosser categories. But I'm just, what do you think initially caused us to be so disparate? I mean, is CDE just a little more hard-nosed about it? Are we optimistic? I'm just trying to figure out what made us change so many.
Great question. So our software is called Cost Lab, and it's a hosted software that you get it and we follow what their recommendations are. They update it every year, like they update how much it costs to replace something on it today in Denver, or they might update a life cycle, but we basically were using their platform, which gives us a life cycle for all components. CDE's software, which again, I mentioned we're going to transition to the similar software, hopefully in a year, has different life cycles. And it's really based on who made the software. And I think the software we purchased that we're moving to is just a little more dialed in than the software we've had for 15 years. So it's really, we use what's built in, unless we find out, let's say Joe's team comes and tells me, Margie, this roof says it has 5 more years, but it needs to be replaced now. We'll go ahead and manually change that in our system, but otherwise we let the system tell us when it thinks something should be replaced.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yep, super helpful. Thank you.
Okay,
Appreciate
you-
that.
You're welcome.
Margie, didn't we switch to this cost lab? What about 4 or 5? It was about the time we were doing the bond, wasn't it? And this was better than what we had before.
So
And-
when I came 15 years ago, we had what was called MARS, MARS. And so CB Richard Ellis, they're a very large real estate developer, purchased MARS and renamed it Cost Lab. So, and then they changed it a little bit. They made it a hosted system versus the type that just lives at your, on your server. But really we've been using it for 15 years. Does that answer your question, Laura?
Yes, I just thought, I remember that I switched to cost lab from and I do Mars
Yep.
rings a bell, and it did change some factors that they were using, I think, but it seems like to be more aligned with CD and the BEST program, particularly when you're going for BEST grants, is probably really helpful for the district to be aligned with that and on the same page. And
Yes. And I think the big change we made, Laura, when CB Richard Ellis purchased, is we stopped including the depreciation factor, which made it really confusing. And that will take a long time to explain because I even have to explain it to myself all the time, but it was escalating our costs beyond what people could understand. Kind of like the example I gave of if you don't fix a plumbing leak, you're going to have more degradation. And that's what that depreciation factor was.
One of the other
Go ahead, please.
one other question that I had, so based on this, you're over the 10%, you're over the allotment. I mean, what does this look like as far as from a funding perspective? I mean, are there huge projects that we have, no funds without another bond, or what are we looking at?
I think I can answer that, but I might
Ballpark, fine.
call Priscilla as a friend. We don't have additional funding to address large items. We need a bond. Priscilla, is that, that's just. nuts
Yeah, I
and
mean,
bolts.
that's correct. I mean, the positive of that is that we've done such a good job of fiscally managing the proceeds that we got from the bond and being really clear on what the projects are, and then utilizing those savings to, bring on as many additional pieces as we could. But we are nearing the end of it, and we are down to the last little bit of money.
Okay.
I didn't touch on the second part of the report, which is the plant contingency fund. And really, and Joe, I don't know if you know more about that than me and you could speak to it, but we really use that for more critical replacements to keep schools open or to deal with the safety issue. We don't just do random upgrades to just address a deferred maintenance, like to bring that percentage down, Kelly. It's more about addressing the very critical items that might come up if there's a massive plumbing break or something that takes 50,000 for some reason. That money is what is used for those types of items. Do I have that? Do you feel that's pretty accurate, Joe?
I think that's an even deeper layer because a lot of the water main breaks we would use capital reserve funding for, and I think plant contingency is the next layer. So if we were completely out of cap reserve funding, then my understanding is there's another backup layer of plant contingency that we would dip into for those dire emergencies. But that money, I think Pat or cabinet kind of holds aside for a very rainy day type fund is my understanding anyways. I might be interpreting that wrong, but
no, you're probably right. I thought they were kind of interconnected, but maybe not. And I don't know if Priscilla knows, but you could be right on, Joe, but we were in compliance on that one, I believe.
So no instructional hours were impacted?
That was 2.5.3, right? Are you guys?
Sorry, did I skip
Yeah,
one?
that's
My bad.
okay. I don't know that one, and I don't know if you guys are meeting on that one, Priscilla, or the 2.5.3.
I would say instructional hours have not been impacted by these different projects because we are really clear in one, we try to make sure that we are not impacting the school year nor the school day as much as possible. And in those situations where we have a school that has to end a little bit early, we go through and run the hours ahead of time and make sure that we're not up against that wall. That's
Okay.
a great question.
It does say that, though. It says plant was operational for 100% of available instructional hours. So we probably adjusted like Priscilla explained. Any other questions about 2.5.2? Or Joe, did I miss anything important?
Yeah, not that I can think of, unless there's other questions we can help with.
Right. Well, I guess that's it for us then, huh?
Okay, any questions, any last minute questions for Margie or Joe before we transition to Tony? Okay, Margie,
much.
Joe,
Thank you.
thank you so much. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
everybody.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you.
All right, Tony, would you like to start maybe by introducing yourself a little bit, talking about your role and introducing some of the friends that you brought with you?
Is Tony on here yet?
Yeah, I'll check with him. He's on. He's just a little bit early, so he might be looking at something. I'll check with him.
Okay, thank you, Sonia. Thanks for joining us, Brenda and Kelly. Appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
Tony's having some technical difficulties. He's going to leave the meeting and come back in.
Okie doke.
Looks like Tony put our introductions in the chat box. So I'm Kelly, I'm a senior buyer in the purchasing department. Brenda, go ahead next.
Hey, sorry about that, everyone. Before I wasn't unable to uncheck the microphone or the video, so I apologize. But yeah, I had to exit out and got back in, and now I'm here. So sorry about that interruption. But yeah, I'm Tony Quinn, the purchasing manager, and I'll let Kelly introduce himself, and then we'll go on to Brenda and then Audra and our purchasing team.
Hello again, this is Kelly in the purchasing department, one of the senior buyers. Mostly work on construction facilities and other tasks as assigned.
Good afternoon. My name is Brenda McGee. I'm also a senior buyer here with the district, and I work with a lot of the athletics, nutrition programs, and other programs and duties as assigned. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Audra Bella, and I am a senior buyer with the district, and I primarily work with IT, software, devices, the whole gamut.
I would also just quickly share, we all sit in a cubicle area, so there's a lot of background noise.
So yeah, so we're here to talk about 2.5.5 of the monitoring report. So as of April of 2022, we went to the policy council, and our policies were increased due to a number of changes. One, supply chain issues. Another one was inflation, COVID, a number of factors. And looking at the other districts or surrounding districts, we had the Denver Public, DPS, Jeffco, Boulder Valley, St. Vrain, Cherry Creek, and Douglas County. So we kind of took all these different thresholds in account, and we also aligned with the CASB policy as well. So what this means is we, just to kind of give you I don't know who was here last year during this monitoring report, but so before, from anywhere from $0 to $5,000 for non-construction items, we required one quote. Now, $0 to $10,000, we require one quote. And then before, from 5,000 to 25,000, the district required three quotes. Now, the district from anywhere from 10,000 to 100,000, the district requires three quotes. And then anything over $25,000 before was a formal proposal or formal RFP or RFX. And then now the district is anything over 100,000, we'll do a formal RFP process or formal solicitation. For the construction side of things, it was 0 to 15 was one quote before, and now that is 0 to 50,000 requires one quote. And then before it was 15,000 to 50,000 required three quotes. Now it is 50,000 to 250,000 requires three quotes. And then anything over 250,000, we do a formal solicitation. What this does is not only gives my small team visibility and traceability of all of our interactions. What we did is we did a comparison from fiscal year 20 to 21 to 22 now. So for our thresholds in fiscal year 21, we had 1,191 transactions. And this fiscal year, or excuse me, in fiscal year 22, we had exactly 1,300 transactions. Of those, we did 821 contracts last year, and 43 of those were formal solicitations. Of these 1,300 transactions that we did, those were a combination of POs, P card transactions, and PDJs. Those were procurement deviation justifications, and good purchases as well. So that's kind of brings you up to speed with our 2.5.5 monitoring report with our thresholds. And, you know, there was no known violations within this time period. Again, with the period before that, there wasn't any either. So we were able to capture all of these solicitations, do a formal bid solicitation, and yeah, that is kind of our process, and a lot of numbers, a lot of POs, a lot of transactions for our small team. But yeah, we have a great team.
So let's pause there real quick, see if there are any questions.
I'm sorry, can you just tell me one more time, how many like formal RFPs did you end up doing now that it's kind of changed?
Yeah. So last year we did 43 solicitations, and that was anywhere from a request for information to a request for proposal, and also a request for quote. Sometimes, you know, if we're buying, let's say soccer goals, we would just request a quote because there wasn't a large scope of work. We just had a dimensions and say, hey, we wanted a white soccer goal of this dimension. We need 10 of them. And then we'll try to get the best pricing and compile those quotes and provide those to our stakeholders to make a selection, best value, best pricing, best lead times, and best quality as well.
How did that compare to the previous year, Tony?
The previous year we had 62 formal solicitations.
So you kind of cut down 20. Overall, you're happy with the changes in the purchasing? Has it helped you guys move a little faster or quickly?
It helps
smoothly?
us move a little faster, and especially in Kelly's world, Kelly does a lot of with our construction and facility and design team. With the cost of labor and materials going up so much, it was hard to kind of get anybody on board. For before we had to do anything that was over $50,000, we had to do a formal RFP. And a lot of times that was, patchwork on a school roof for $50,000 would have to get multiple quotes. When, if it wasn't under warranty or things like that. So now with it being up to 250,000, it gives us a lot. We're able to react a lot faster. So we could call vendors that we know that could fix a roof, and we could get them on site a lot faster. So we don't have a leaky roof. We could get a contractor out there a lot quicker. And if you guys, if you guys want an example of kind of how the bid process goes, we could give you some examples. I don't know if Kelly, if you want to walk them through just kind of a solicitation process, and you don't have to go to too much detail, but we could just give some high overviews from the kickoff and committee guidelines and up into the contract and PO phase.
Sure. And let me know if I'm giving it too much or not enough in any category. What we typically do when I'm introduced to basically the procurement phase. So there's been planning in the district in the facility planning group, construction, or probably at the board level even. And when we get to the spot where it's time to go out and do a solicitation, or we think it is, we'll have a planning meeting with some basic stakeholders. And in my world, that would probably be like construction director, facility director, maybe the project manager assigned to that. And then we meet in typically a Google meeting. And first thing I ask is, what's the budget? Because policy will tell me what process that we're going to follow. Most of those projects are fairly good size, so we're going to be over the threshold that requires competitive vetting, for lack of a better word. The kind of vetting we do will depend on the project and possible risk, timing, and all of that. So Tony mentioned, we have requests for quotes. We can do requests for proposals, which is more in depth. Typically, pricing is not the key component. It's best value. Pricing is usually a part of that. And we do a lot of RFPs, and we also do a lot of hard bids. If it's very specific work and minimal chance of misinterpretation by contractors, we may do a hard bid. But then you have to live by low price. You don't get to throw in any additional factors. And so we've learned over time that a lot of times things are more important than just price. You get what you're paying for, essentially. So we do a lot of RFPs here. Basically, that process is we build a scope of work. They might have hired consultants or architects to do that kind of work. I then bring their work into our boilerplate or template for, say, it's an RFP. And that's truly the heartbeat of a solicitation. It tells the contractors what they're going to need to know to be successful in that project. Next phase is we have a question period. So once it's out on the street, so to speak, and we use an online bidding platform, probably 98% of the time, 99% of the time, it's called BidNet Direct. It gets it out there to at least, I think they say about 70% of the school districts and other local governmental agencies utilize that online bidding platform. So we're getting out in front of the same contractors that everybody's typically using on the front range. And we put it out for a period of time, allow them to submit questions. We then submit responses in the form of an addendum. We try to limit that just to minimize confusion. Then we give them a period of time to formulate their responses, submit their proposals. They do that online, so there's no chance of someone perceiving that I could open it early, for example, and share it with another contractor. Right? It can't happen when we use the online bidding platform. If the bids are due at 10 a.m., I cannot open it until 10:01. So it's got to be past 10 a.m. and 59 seconds. And so it protects everybody in that regard. Then I tabulate the information to share with the evaluating committee. And I tabulate in two fashions. One is, did they turn in required paperwork? And sometimes there's hard stops in there. So if they fail to turn in a particular document, we may not be able to consider them for the rest of the evaluation process. Fortunately, that doesn't happen often. It's not a great message to have to send back to a contractor. And we have a lot of in-depth conversation about that process if we have a pre-bid or pre-proposal meeting with the contractors to make sure that they understand the kinds of information and what documents are crucial that they submit. Then I share with the evaluating committee. We've assembled a score sheet based on the criteria that we shared in the RFP. They score that, and then we come up with a ranking based on scores. And depending on the kind of project, there may be another layer in there, which includes interviews with the final, say top 3 possibly. We've done as many as up to 6 when we had our earlier bigger projects going on in the school district during bond. And then we may have an internal approval process through the cabinet level that we've submitted a recommendation from the evaluation committee. And once we get that, we publish on BidNet again a notice of intent, which is just to let all the players know that we intend to go with company A, B, or C, or all of those. And then we work directly with the awarded contractors through a notice of award and then a handoff for the contract phase, which could be me, but up until now, we've had a contract administrator for bond related that another person plays a role in that. That's not here in this meeting. So that's kind of the process. We condense everything in this school district. We were talking yesterday at another meeting. We do all of that in usually about 2 months. If we're lucky.
Yeah.
A lot of other agencies, and in the meeting we were in the other day, it's usually 6 months for a project that size. So there's pros and cons to rushing it, but on the other hand, we know where our windows of opportunity to get work done. Like when I actually got into the meeting early and you were having your conversations with Margie, I think the goal is to not impact student learning, right? So we do these summer miracles, as they call them, trying to get all that work done in just a few weeks' time.
Correct.
Questions?
Yeah, thank you, Kelly. And, we also do, multi-year solicitations as well, where we draft in the contracts, this will be a set price for up to 3 years. We don't do a 3-year contract, but we have the option to renew for up to 3 years. So after that first year, after the fiscal year, we could renew for up to 3 to 5 years as well. So, and that's, gives a lot of the vendors to sharpen the pencils a little bit on pricing.
Tony, are you seeing with, the current, I guess, inflationary pressures, are you trying to do shorter term deals right now and then wait until things drop to do more of those multi-years? Yeah,
and it kind of depends if it is like a lot of our, I'm trying to think of a quick example, but we try to lock in the best price that we can. And if we have a vendor that gives us a price for a 1-year commitment, but if we say, well, what if we use you for 5 years, that 1-year price might be discounted by 10 to 15%. If the district, likes the service. If we don't like the service, we don't have to renew after that first or second year, but at least we're getting that discount on the front end.
Okay, thank you.
I would just add, for example, like trash services, we're actually doing a solicitation now. It's been 5 years for all of the terms that we just went through. And so it's time to do another one. And so we'll do 1 year with 4 annual renewal options. After the second year, we put some language in there that allows for negotiated pricing, knowing that things are happening in the marketplace between labor alone, let alone the goods side of it and fuel and all of that.
Yeah, like propane, for example, you know, we try to lock in those type of prices on the front end because we don't know how the market's going to shift. But you know, it could go down in our favor where we could adjust that pricing accordingly at the next renewal. Any other questions?
I guess only other one, just because there's this really cool language in the report, but any procurement deviation justification forms submitted during this quarter or this renewal period?
Yes, I could give you an exact number in just 1 second.
Do you, while Tony's looking for that, do you all know what that form is utilized for?
Looks like it's if you don't follow the process in gross layman's terms there, Kelly.
As a general rule, that probably would be the best way to define it. However, there are times where it's a way to formalize, let's say there's like two-way radios, you know, that we use for emergency use and the communication in the district. There's really only one primary dealer on the Front Range that handles Motorola. So it's challenging to go out and do a formal process, even though the amount of spend would indicate by policy that that's what we should do. And so we still look into what the options are, because you just don't want to always assume nothing's changed in the market. But I'm working on that one right now as well for the next 5 years. And it's seeming to be that we will have to use a PDJ of sorts, possibly, because there just is no competition. I wouldn't call it sole source. Some people will say that a lot of the times, but I would call it more of a single source. And that document would be used for that kind of a situation as well.
Makes
So they're not
sense.
always used for what I call speeding tickets.
Yeah, sometimes you do need that very specific vendor. I get you.
We also utilize PDJs a lot with IT, more specific to software. When we've got our whole district using a specific software where our kids are already trained, our teachers are already familiar with it, we wouldn't want to change it very often. So PDJs sometimes allow us to keep using the software that has been approved.
Makes sense. Thanks, Audra.
Yeah, we had about 165 total PDJs done last year. So that some cases, you know, it could be like you said, just it's emergency, it's a sole source. You know, there might be a flood at a school and we need to get somebody out there and to shut off the valve. So we just do an emergency PDJ and then get them out there to fix the floors or to, you know, for cleanup or whatever it could be.
Excellent. Thank you.
What about 2.4.13, selection of auditing services?
Yeah, I don't have that specific one. So what we did is at the end of fiscal year 21, we did an RFP for auditing services. So we submitted it. We had 4 responses, and then we did interviews with, you know, a couple members of finance, HR, and then I believe risk might have been involved in there as well.
This group
Um,
also
Yeah,
participated.
yeah, this FAC community. Yep, exactly. I remember some of your faces. So we did the scoring for the auditor, and then we did a notice of intent to the recommended provider, that's CLA, and then we did a notice of award and a contract. With that contract, we have up to, I want to say it's 5 renewal years, but I don't, yeah, okay. So yeah, I think we have 3 left after this year.
Thank you.
Best of my memory.
It's a good memory.
Thanks. All right. Well, I'm glad we were able to get this done on a Wednesday. We've been rescheduling so many times due to snow days and everything else. I'm glad we were able to connect. So please let us know if you have any other questions.
I found one more. I apologize. I'm the
course.
question person. Were any of your bids protested in the last year?
No, we didn't have any protests.
Perfect.
So Tony, just double checking, because I'm kind of new to the group. I want to make sure that we went through 5.0 purchasing compliance, 2.55 conflict of interest, 2.55 contracts and bids. And then you just addressed a question on 2.413 around the independent auditor.
Correct. So I think we covered everything. And then I didn't know if we had, 2.5.7. I think that was Matt Schaefer might have covered that during the last presentation with you guys. Okay. So yeah, we did touched on all those.
Okay, great. So FAC members, any other questions for Tony and team?
This is Kelly. When I look in the chat box, one of the bullet items was conflict of interest. I don't think there's anything alarming to share there other than if you want to talk about it or what that process is.
I think touching on that would be good, Kelly.
Yeah.
You want to, Tony, or you want me to?
Yeah, I could touch from, at the beginning of a person's employment, HR has them sign a conflict of interest form. What we also do is do a committee guidelines form. So whenever we're doing a solicitation, we send it to all of our committee members and scoring members. I'm sure some of you did it for the audit finding. And so what we do is we collect those, get it back, and make sure that nobody within the committee that's scoring is communicating on behalf of the district to the vendors. And then all of the communications done directly through procurement. And we do all of the questioning through procurement through an addendum like Kelly mentioned, where all the committee members will be able to answer the vendors or suppliers questions and then send it to all of the vendors so they have the same responses for all the questions as well. Anything else, Kelly? Did I miss anything?
No, we're trying to do our due diligence to let them know up front that we don't want to spoil a competition and have to do it all over. One, because we don't have the time primarily. And secondly, it's just, the right thing to do. We instruct the stakeholders and the evaluating committee, sometimes whether they're scoring or not. Sometimes we'll have consultants, architects as part of the group. They're non-scoring members, but yet I give them the same instructions. If they're any communication coming in from a contractor, a supplier, or something about that solicitation, to just direct it to me and I will respond to it. Even if I have to go back to the architect to get the answer to the question, I still want to route all that, funnel it through the purchasing department. So there's minimal risk of a claim or a protest happening because someone feels that someone got an unfair advantage. Thanks.
Yeah, and sometimes after, if we do an award to the vendor and another vendor says, hey, why weren't we selected? Then we do what we call a debrief with the vendors and just tell them, hey, you're really strong in this, you could improve on this area. But we definitely encourage them to bid on future solicitations. All right. Well, thank you. Let us know if you have any questions. I provided Sonia a list of all of our contracts and bids or solicitations. So it should be in that 2.5 folder where if you have any questions or if you want to, I know in previous years, there was a selected handful of contracts that you wanted to review and a couple of the RFPs just to give you a kind of idea of the scoring, the evaluation, and the criteria that we're asking for. So if you would like to request those documents, we can provide them at any time. Well, thank you.
Thanks, Tony. We appreciate you and your team taking some time for us.
Of course, anytime. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
All right, so we are right on time. I believe the last 10, 12 minutes is really work time for all of you. So Gavin, if you will please stop